Is expressing shock that a case of culpable homicide, or at least one of the charges, has been dropped against former President Jacob Zuma's son, Duduzane, after the state told the court that the victim suffered from a pre-existing condition. The court heard that Zuma will not have to answer for the death of Mashaba, who died in hospital a few weeks after the crash. This after a pathologist ruled that Mashaba's death was as a result of natural causes. Ulrich Roux, director at Ulrich Roux and Associates, joins us now on Skype for more details. A very good evening to you, Mr. Roux. Thank you so much for speaking to us. First of all, your reaction to this. Were you surprised that the state decided to withdraw that charge?
Hi, good evening. I think what we must remember is that the charge of culpable homicide is defined as the unlawful, unintentional, so negligent killing of another person. So the second passenger passing away had nothing to do, according to the pathologist, with the actual car accident, because the person had a pre-existing medical condition and died of natural causes. So one cannot attribute the negligence or the alleged negligence that the state is claiming of Duduzane Zuma to the death of that person, and accordingly they've withdrawn the charges against that person. I think strategically it's a wise decision by the state, because if you try and prove a case where it's clear that no negligence on behalf of the driver can be proven in the death of that specific victim, then you're actually weakening your entire case. The state obviously believes that they have a strong case against Duduzane Zuma pertaining to the death of the other passenger, and that they should pursue that in all its earnest.
Okay, so we'll look at the other charges in just a moment, but just some clarification, if you would, on some of what came out of court. What is the distinction then if we talk about somebody dying out of natural causes, but also saying that it's a pre-existing illness? So for me, it just sounds like a contradiction in terms, but could you perhaps tell us what it means from a legal perspective?
It's very basic. The death had to be caused by the car accident. In this case, the pathologist found that it was not, so they cannot pursue with that charge against pertaining to the death of that specific victim. That person did not die as a result of the car accident. That was the finding of the pathologist.
Okay, so then let's talk about the other charges that remain. You say the state would rather win the stronger of the two. So there is the case of negligent driving that remains, and the other of culpable homicide. But earlier on, when you're explaining, it sounded as though they are somehow related. Could you just then unpack that for us?
So, culpable homicide, as I said, is unlawful, negligent killing of another person. So, the negligence is an essential requirement in order for the state to be able to prove this charge against Duduzane Zuma. They must prove that as a result of his negligence, that person passed away. So, he negligently drove too fast, he negligently lost control over his car, and he negligently caused this car accident which led to the death of that passenger. So negligence is the big factor in this matter, and if the state can show 1% negligence on behalf of Duduzane Zuma, then he must be convicted. So, it does become somewhat technical. And that's why the speed of the vehicle comes into play to a large extent, as well as whether the car aquaplaned, as well as whether, Duduzane Zuma could have done anything to have prevented this accident from happening, and whether it had occurred in the first instance as a result of his negligent driving on that evening.
So obviously, without preempting what's going to happen in court, when you say 1% negligence, so what would that take? What would they have to prove? I know you mentioned the actions that he would take. We had Porsche testify today, but what would they really have to prove in this case?
Well, they would have to prove that he did not at all times have the required attention that a person has to have when driving a vehicle at that speed and on that particular road, and on that evening, given that it was a rainy evening. A higher degree of care was required from him. That's the first instance. Secondly, if it can be proven that he was speeding, then that shows that he was negligent because there is a speed limit, and if you exceed the speed limit and an accident ensues as a result thereof, then you can attribute that accident to the excessive speed that the driver was driving. So I can only assume that the state is going to try and focus on the fact that he was speeding on that evening, and that as a result of the speeding, his car aquaplaned because the road was wet. He lost control of the car as a result of his speeding, and that's what led to the accident and the subsequent death of the passenger in the taxi.
All right, thank you very much for that. Ulrich Roux is director of Ulrich Roux Associates, speaking to us on Skype there. Let's take you back to Steve.